Good morning. The topic for today is what happens when something gives taste into tools we use to make food. Maybe the first part will be a kind of repetition for what you studied with Rav Yair for a couple of weeks ago, about what happens when non-kosher food is mixed into the kosher food. I hope you remember more or less what we studied then. I will repeat it very shortly because it's the base of what is happening when we use, or by mistake, put something non-kosher into tools that we use. I would not speak about after we have tools that have been used for non-kosher, how we make them kosher. Again, that is a topic for itself. So we won't go through that today. But shortly, I will just repeat the main principle that we already studied. Main principle saying that, of course, not something that isn't kosher, not allowed to eat. But when something that isn't kosher by mistake falls into a pot full of, or a mixture of something that is kosher, and there's a mixture between kosher and unkosher. In old days, what they did was to check with a non-Jewish expert, a non-Jew that is allowed to eat, that is an expert for taste, and they tasted, are the rest of this thing that came into the mixture, is the taste of this kosher, is it there? Do you taste it? Okay. So if there is a meat, non-kosher meat that falls into a soup, do you taste the meat in the soup? Of course, if it's a meat that you could take out, you take it out, of course. But if it's impossible to take it out, it has been a part of the mixture. But still, you have to check that there's no taste of that in the soup. Now, we don't know exactly. We're not expert for taste, and according to most, it's not something we do anymore, and because of that, we have the main principle that I'm sure you went through is 1 to 60. So if there is less than 1 to 60 from the non-kosher into the kosher, then we see the mixture as kosher because it's too little. If it's more than 1 to 60, in general, there are, of course, issues that are different, but in general, then the whole mixture is non-kosher. We see it as non-kosher. It's important when I say that, just to remind, and again, we're in the topic of mixtures, that is only the case that it's kosher less than 1 to 60. There are, like, if you put it by purpose, if someone put it in because they want it in, then you can't say then it's not a way. Then it's there and the whole pot is unkosher. If there are also some occasions where even less than 1 to 60 is not kosher. One example is if it's a full alive thing. If it's not something that is alive, so what was alive, of course, if it's alive, it's very strict not to eat it. But if it's a total flu, it's not something that is total. That's, again, you have to take it out first. You can't say, oh, I don't find it, it's okay. In our days, I don't think many will eat when you see the flu inside. So I don't think it's a big issue, but it's important to understand the idea of not eating a full life creature, a full creature, let's call it that, bria, we call it in Hebrew. And in addition, if it's less than 1 to 60, but it's something that gives a strong taste, you taste it. So we say, okay, it's less than 1 to 60, but we still taste it as a very strong spices or things like that. Then also we see it as non-kosher. If it's less than 1 to 60, but it's something that changes the whole the whole pot. The best example we use often is gelatin or rennet. We could have a very little of it, but it changed the whole thing. It has a meaning. It has a, you feel it. Then even less than 1 to 60 is not kosher. That's just to remember. And there are more examples, but that's maybe the main examples that we could speak about. So now we spoke about 1 to 60, and then that is when it's mixtures in the food. In the end of last study, you also spoke about what happens when it's mixed not in a food, but in a tool, in a pot from kind of aluminium or plastic or anything that gives taste into something else. Okay, so it's important to speak about, when we speak about tools. In the one hand, it's very clear that the tools that were discussed in the days of the Talmud are not exactly the same tools as we have today. Meaning, the pots today are made from another kind of iron. It's easier to clean them, and it's much less normal to taste in a pot what was made in it before. Meaning, it's hard to say that we are today in our pot actually feel the taste, and it probably was more of that in old days. But we could still have many places, also in our days, where we taste. I don't know if you have anything with plastic gives a lot of taste. You have kind of big thermos keeping hot things. If you put in them coffee, you'll taste coffee a long time after. And many other things. So we could see the idea and we feel the idea that the tool itself gets into it, the taste of what was cooked in it before. And because of that, it's important to say that the rules of tools that become non-kosher by cooking in them non-kosher things are still today, even if we can say now the pots today are not the same. So because of that, if we have a situation where we cook in a pot something that isn't kosher, or a mixture with more than 1 to 60 of something that isn't kosher, the pot itself becomes non-kosher. And now, when we will cook something else in it that is kosher, this becomes non-kosher. And this is the base of the whole idea, as we know, for having things being needing a kosher kitchen. We need a kosher kitchen because the tools themselves have to be kosher or non-kosher, or kosher, and also milk and meat. We'll speak about that a little later. The tools themselves have to be kosher, and since the tools themselves have to be kosher, we have to have a kosher kitchen. And since the tools themselves have to be kosher, we can't just go and buy things according to the ingredients that are in it, or eat in a restaurant according to the ingredients and other things we have to check, because they also make the food in non-kosher tools. It has a lot to say reason why it's maybe harder to keep kosher based on this principle, that the tools themselves become non-kosher, and then the taste from the tools themselves go into the food. Just to speak practically about that. So when I go to a restaurant, I want to eat, it has to be a kosher restaurant, it has to be kosher pots, it has to be everything kosher. There are some few occasions where, at least when it comes to the tools, we are more secure. For example, if we go to a place that makes waffles, they have this waffle machine, they only make waffles in it, nothing else. Then we know that they haven't used, we know we could rely on that they haven't used that thing for something that isn't kosher. But if there are kinds of waffles that aren't kosher, then we can't eat any waffle any place, because then we don't know which waffle they have used them for. Same if we go to a restaurant and want to eat cooked egg in the morning, then we have to check if they cook the eggs in pots that are normal, that they use other things for. Then it will be problematic to eat these eggs. But if they have, as most hotels have, a special kind of egg cooker that only is used for eggs, then the eggs are kosher and we can eat them, because they are cooked in something that has never been used for non-kosher. So just to remind the principle is that we have the pot. If something inside gave taste into the pot, then the pot itself is non-kosher. And now when we put something else in, the non-kosher goes back. To make things, after saying that it's strict and clear, let's make things a little more complicated. I think you also touched that in the last shiur, but it's good with a repetition. What happens in mixture of when we mix something that isn't kosher more than 1:60 into a pot? When this thing that comes in, let's say it's a meat, an old meatball, okay, that falls into the soup, but this old meatball is from 2 weeks ago, so it's stinky. It doesn't have a good taste, okay? It has maybe a strong taste, so maybe the strong taste is there, but it's stinky. What is the halacha then? More than 1:60. What happens with the pot? Could you maybe someone help me? Is it kosher or non-kosher? Is the food kosher? Yes? Anyone? It's only yes or no, so you have 50% chance of.
It's not kosher.
It's not kosher. So 50%, then you fell in the wrong side. It is kosher, and I explain why it is. It's like surprising. Okay, why is it kosher? There's a non-kosher meat falling into, and it's more than 1:60, then it's not kosher. Why is it kosher? Because it's something we call in Hebrew Noten Ta'am lifgam. Noten Ta'am is giving taste. Lifgam is a bad taste. It's something that you don't want. So when you have something that really ruins the taste, I don't speak about, oh, it fell some pepper and I don't like pepper so much. Something that is really like old and bad, and it comes, or that something that ruins, like I don't know, if you have something more stinky that it doesn't work together with the food at all, then it's ruining the taste. And when it's ruining the taste, it's kosher, even if it's more than 1:60. There's long discussions about what does it mean, ruining the taste, and if it's a lot, maybe it gives, okay, so the taste is going down, but the measure of the food is going up, so maybe it's balanced. And then it's not ruining the taste because we gain more food. In a way, that's the discussion. But the principle is, and that is the important thing for what I want to speak about, when food goes in to a mixture and that food is ruining the taste, is bad, then the principle of 1:60 isn't there anymore. And even if it's 3:60, the food is kosher. Why is that important when we speak about the taste that is inside the tools? Why is that important? It is important because our sages say that then what happens when the tool is old? No one used the tool the past 2 months. If there was any taste that is inside the tool, after 2 months, that is not a good taste anymore. Okay? So based on that, and we're not speaking about 2 months, we actually discussion if we speak about over the night or 24 hours. So let's speak about 24 hours. After 24 hours, the taste inside the tool is bad, and anything that will be used in that tool after is giving a bad taste to the food, and because of that is kosher. Okay? And now all of you can say, thank you, Yoav. Now you solved all our problems. We can eat any place just that they haven't used the tools the past 24 hours. Then even if the tools are not kosher, everything that comes in to them later is giving a bad taste, and we can eat. So the whole idea, based on what I said now, should have been, I could prepare you, we're not allowed to eat anywhere. It doesn't help all the problems. But based on the idea, any tool that is after 24 hours, the whole idea of the taste from the first food goes into the next food isn't existing anymore. And because of that, the food itself is kosher. What is the problem? The problem is that we said that when it comes to mixtures, that it's only relevant when we do them by mistake. Okay? So if I by mistake mix something less than 1:60 or something with a bad taste into the food, then the food is kosher. But if I do it by purpose, I take something that is very little, but I know that I'm doing it, even less than 1:60, and I put it into the food, the whole food is on kosher because I did it by purpose. It wasn't by mistake. Same will be here when we put something that gives a bad taste. If I by purpose take something that gives a bad taste and put it into the food, of course, the food isn't kosher. The whole idea saying that is a way is when it happens by mistake. And when that is said, I go back to the pot. Yes, if we by mistake made food in non-kosher tools more than 24 hours after they're used, the food will be kosher. But it's only when we did it by mistake. And because of that, we're not allowed to cook or to eat food that was made in non-kosher tools at all. Okay? So the whole idea is when we did it by mistake. And because it's important to know it, so don't be afraid. If you did a mistake, the food is still kosher. And it's very important to remember that. And it helps to be a little less afraid. Oh, I could eat something non-kosher. No, if it's by mistake, it's okay. But in the same time, remember that even if you knew this rule that after 24 hours the food is kosher, it's only kosher when it's by mistake. And because of that, we're not allowed to eat in non-kosher kitchens. We have to kosher kitchens, our own things when we put something wrong in it, and so on. Rebecca, yes.
That's kind of what I was going to ask. Like if you, for instance, if you by a mistake use the wrong cutlery, like you say you use a milk cutlery for meat, do you not have to, boil the cutlery afterwards, like to do like a catering process of the cutlery, or?
Yes, I by purpose didn't speak about meat and milk. Okay, I will speak about it in a moment. But general to your question, if we by mistake use non-kosher food or milk and meat together in a pot or with any cutlery, anything we use, of course we have to make them kosher before we can eat them. And as long we haven't made them kosher, we're not allowed to use them. Exactly. But if I put the pot in the side because I used by mistake something non-kosher in it, and I want to kosher it next week, and by mistake my son came home and made food in that pot more than 24 hours after I used it, less than, it doesn't help at all, more than 24 hours, then the food he made is kosher. We don't throw it because it has gone more than 24 hours, but I still need to kosher it because it has become non-kosher. And we said we're not allowed to mix even what's in the pot, even after many days, we're not allowed to mix by purpose. And because of that, we need to kosher the pot and everything. Okay. So that is the main rule when it comes to mixture of kosher and non-kosher. Let's speak a little about milk and meat together. Milk in itself is kosher, and meat in itself is kosher. Should we be more strict or less strict when it comes to meat and milk? That's a general question. Then with a non-kosher meat or fish or anything else that isn't kosher, is it more strict or less strict? What do you think? Yes, here again, there are only two answers, more or less, so two chances. And maybe the answer is more complicated than one of them. Yes.
I'm guessing
Yes.
it's more strict mixing milk and meat because of what is said in the Torah about not cooking in its mother's milk.
Yeah. So what you say is that in difference from kosher and non-kosher, where we are only afraid of, what are we afraid of? Mixing the non-kosher into the kosher. In milk and meat, we have to remember there is a new element. Not only that the mixture between meat and milk makes the food non-kosher, we can't eat it, but the mixture itself is forbidden. We're not allowed to cook it in. So if I take milk and I put into meat and we mix it together, okay, then it's not only that I made the food non-kosher, I have done something that is forbidden by cooking them together, okay? And by that, it's very important to, for example, there is a discussion of how long does, if we speak about mixture, okay? There is a principle saying that when I took a little meat into milk, the whole pot is now treif, nevela, as we say, non-kosher. The whole pot is non-kosher. And when I take a little out of that into a new place, it's not okay. We only measure the meat that went into the milk. We measure it all as non-kosher. When it comes to kosher and non-kosher, like if it's non-kosher meat, we do the same, but it's a discussion. Some say that when we take from one mixture over to the other, the percents go down. In milk, in meat and milk, it doesn't do that. In milk and meat, when we mixture, it's the whole mixture is non-kosher because the mixture is the problem. And it's important to say we normally, and especially Ashkenazi Jews, follow exactly the same principle also when a mixture goes into a new mixture, a new mixture, also in kosher or non-kosher, not only in milk and meat, but there is a discussion. In meat and milk, there's no discussion. The meat and milk together, that is boiled together, is in itself the whole problem. And because of that, what you say, Monica, is very correct. We have to be more strict with meat and milk because of the mixture. In the second hand, there is also something that make meat and milk less strict. And that is before the mixture. Okay? So let's see. I'll show you a text from the Talmud. Let's read it together. My mouse is like this. There's a little working less this morning. It has its Sunday. Here, do you see the text?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Good. Just make it so I can see you also for myself. Great. Okay. Anyone who can read?
Yes,
I can read.
I can read. It was stated, if a fish was removed from the fire and placed still hot in a bowl in which meat had been eaten, Rav says, it is prohibited to eat the fish with the milk dish kuta, since the fish has absorbed meat from the bowl, and Shmuel says, it is permitted to eat the fish with
Kutach. It's kutach.
kuta.
Kutach is something that is a milk dish, okay? It's with milk. The question here is, are we allowed to eat a fish? Fish is, of course, considered as what we call today as parve, with milk, with a milk dish. What is the problem? The problem is that it was in a bowl where meat was eaten hot, okay? So we have a fish that has been in a meat bowl, hot, making it what may be called besari, meaty. And now we want to take this meat, this fish, and eat it with milk, okay? And there is a discussion, okay? Shmuel says, Rav is the first one, it's not allowed to eat it. It's made in a bowl of meat, and because of that, you can't eat it with milk. While Shmuel says that it's permitted to eat it with milk. Why? What is the idea of Shmuel, if anyone could explain? Why it was just now got taste. It got taste from the bowl of meat, and now you're allowed to mix it with milk. How could that be possible? The question is out to you. We will read on in a second. Try to think, what could be the idea of Shmuel? Why it is allowed to take, and again, it's on the same day, okay? If it was after 24 hours, you could say it didn't get the taste of the meat because it's a bad taste and so on. Maybe we could say that, okay? But why should it be allowed to use a fish made in or heated in or was hot in a bowl of meat together with milk? Yes. Justin.
Just a guess, but maybe actually now I'm thinking about it, it's wrong, but it's losing temperature. It's getting cold, right? It's removed from the heat.
Yeah, it says it was removed from the heat, so it could have been the answer. I know what the Talmud discussed later, so that isn't the idea of Shmuel, but it could have been when it's less hot.
Yeah.
And that's important to say in all mixtures. When we speak about tools, I didn't say it. It's not when something has been in the tools, but when they have been heated in the tool. It's a very important point that you remind me to repeat. We don't think of mixtures normally, it's a mixture, and also cold is a mixture. But when we speak about tools, it's only when it was heated up that the tools themselves take the taste. So what you say here, I see they were removed, so it was maybe still hot, but not as hot. And that could have been a good answer. So thank you for that. It's not the answer of Shmuel because I know what he says. Someone else that could think about an idea, it's harder. It's not, normally we have a question and all the answers could be correct. Here I want you to guess what Shmuel will say. Why is it allowed, according to Shmuel, to use the fish that was cooked in or heated in a bowl, or was hot in a bowl of meat, to eat that fish with milk? Yes, Katu or Monica.
Could it be because it's eaten with the kutach, that it's separated, it's not mixed into the kutach?
So you say it's not cooked together later. Okay, could
No.
have been a good answer. I also thought that when we read, I say, okay, how do you know that it's cooked later? Okay, maybe you eat it separately, but in the same meal or something like that. The idea is actually to mix it together, mix it hot together, blah, 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 together, no problem. Okay, so it's going all the way. We're allowed to mix it hot. Mia,
Oh, sorry.
you want to try?
Yeah, so I actually asked Rav Yair about this, and I am not sure. I'm sure he gave me the right answer for my direct question. So he said something about, it's called, I believe, nat banat. So it's something about the taste being transferred twice, once to the equipment and then from the equipment to the something, and that weakens the taste, and therefore it should be permitted.
Exactly. We are now in the source of what you call nat barnat. Okay, very good. Okay, and you said it like in point. You spoke about giving taste twice. Okay, Daniel, did you want to say something, or should we continue?
I'm just thinking, will the fish become meaty if it's
Okay, so that's what you ask. The question is, and it's a good question. That's exactly the question.
Yeah.
Is the fish now meaty or not? Okay. So let's see what it says on. Yes, you could continue reading also this one.
Yes, yes. The Gemara explains, Rav says that it is prohibited to eat fish with kutah because this is a case of imparted flavor, that is from the meat to the fish. And Shmuel says that it is permitted because the flavor is first imparted to the bowl and only then from the bowl to the fish. This is therefore a case of imparted flavor.
I'll take it down so you can see the fish. This mouse is hard for me. Just a moment. I thought you were seeing it all here.
Flavor derived from the imparted flavor.
Yes. So we're speaking about taste or flavor that goes not one way, but two ways. Okay, that's what it says. That's what Mia said, nat barnat, giving taste. If I have to translate it, son of giving a taste. Okay. And what is the idea? What is the principle? Sorry for, I'm stopping the sharing and we explain so that I can see better. Here. What is the idea of Shmuel? Shmuel says, you can't say that this fish has become meat. It's not meat, it's fish. It's fish. And saying one thing is what we said, that the taste from the pot or from the tools go into the food that we cook it in. That's correct, that goes. But we don't say that it's the meat. Think how long we go. Someone has used this bowl with meat. Now the meat taste go from the meat to the bowl itself. Okay, and now we take the meat out and wash it, and we put fish in it. Now the fish, the taste of the meat goes from the bowl to the fish. And now we take that fish and we take it in milk, and the taste from the meat from the before the bowl goes from the fish to the milk, and it's a mixture. So what Shmuel says, it's that you don't say all that. You don't do that. meat is kosher, milk is kosher. And as long as they're kosher, they're in kosher status. And you don't, the meat taste doesn't go on in our way. We consider it as long as it's kosher. It goes only one way, not two ways. And because of that, we can't say that the meat from the bowl goes over to the fish, go over to the milk. That we don't say. If it was non-kosher, we could say it, because now the fish is non-kosher. So the non-kosher fish is now mixed on with other things. But saying that the milk status or the meat status goes on, even if the food itself is without any meat and milk, that we don't say, according to what Shmuel says here. Yes, Tabitha or Tom.
Is that what we call becheskat basari? And when it's something like that? Because it's cooked in that bowl.
Yeah, becheskat basari is in a way what you said. Yes, so it's something that has been made in meat, or if you like, bake things together with milk things.
Yeah,
it could be the same. The consequences are less. I think they say, yeah, it's the same. What you say is the same. We can say it's exactly the same. Okay. But then we have, let's speak about this fish, okay? And just to say it, halacha is like Shmuel, not like Rav. So we follow the idea of Shmuel that we allowed, or not say we allowed, okay? That if we cook rice in a meat pot, okay, this rice is allowed to eat not only in milk meals, but mixed with milk. We're allowed to mix it with milk, according to what Shmuel says, okay? But after we learn the principle, and the idea is, it's important to say, someone could ask, then why do we have milk and meat pots at all? And here it was very important to go back to what Monica told us. If we take a pot of meat, this, instead of this fish, we put milk directly in, not only that it becomes non-kosher, but the cooking itself is forbidden. Because of that, it's very important to have milk and meat separated, because we're not allowed to mix them with each other at all. What Shmuel teaches us, that if we have something in them, milk or meat tools, then they don't become meat and milk at all. Okay? And according to what Shmuel says, we're allowed to mix. Now, to make it a little more complicated, I could ask you a question. What do you think? I said that rice that was cooked in a meat pot is allowed to eat with milk. Okay? But I have a question. Am I allowed to, by purpose, to begin with, take a meat pot, cook rice in it, and use it with milk? Or is this case only when it happened? Like when the fish was through the meat and I want later to put it with milk, I'm allowed. But if I knew that I want to mix the fish with milk, I shouldn't. Is the principle we don't give taste, does that mean that we could just use our milk and meat tools for parve things and then mix them? Or is it only when it happened? What do you think?
No, you cannot do that. Okay, this is going to be risky. I believe there's a source that says that you can cook something parve in a meat dish and use it for dairy unless you cooked it in the meat dish with intention of using it for meat.
Yes. So what you say, I have to help you now, and everyone who wants to answer. Here, almost all the answers are correct because we have so many interpretations. So what you say is exactly what Rema says, okay? That Ashkenazi Jews follow, okay? Rema says Shulchan Aruch comes with this principle from Shmuel, and then Rema says, but we don't do it to begin with, okay? Meaning that according to Shulchan Aruch, you probably allowed to take this. It's also a question is what is to begin with. So there's those discussions there. So let's separate Rema and Shulchan Aruch now. Shulchan Aruch says the things as Shmuel said, okay? And according to Shulchan Aruch, I can show you the text, but we saw the text, okay? So according to Shulchan Aruch, we are allowed to mix the fish with milk. And now there is questions, does that mean that we are allowed to cook it with meat to begin with? Or not with meat, of course, in a meat pot to begin with, to mix it with milk? Some say yes, that's what we read. So according to some, according to the Shulchan Aruch, we are allowed to take a pot of meat, put rice in it, and use that rice by purpose for milk. Some understand Shulchan Aruch a little different. What I said now is according, for example, to what Rav Ovadia Yosef says. Okay, his way of understanding the Shulchan Aruch is what I said now. You're allowed to take rice, cook it in a meat pot, and after you remove it, mix it with milk. Some say no. What Shmuel said and what Shulchan Aruch refers to is when you have cooked rice in a pot of meat and you later want to use it with milk, you're allowed. But if you know you want to use it with milk, you have to cook it in a milk pot. That's two explanations on the idea of Shulchan Aruch, okay? Rema says you're not allowed to do it to begin with, okay? Another question, what does that mean to begin with? Are we not allowed to take the rice to begin with and mix it with the milk? So Shmuel is right, is tzalacha, well, we don't do it. We don't take rice that was cooked in a pot of meat and then mix it with milk. That's one explanation. Another explanation says we don't cook it in that. What he meant, Rema, is we don't cook it, but if we were cooked it, we're allowed to mix it, okay? So actually we have three different possible opinions if we mix Rema and Shulchan Aruch together. Just to repeat. One, we allowed to cook rice in a pot of meat, without meat, of course, but a meaty pot, and mix it with milk. Number two, according to one understanding in the Shulchan Aruch and one understanding in Rema, we are not allowed to cook by purpose in a pot of meat to then mix it with milk, but if we have cooked it, we're allowed to mix it after, if it wasn't meant. That's number two. And number three says, even rice that has been cooked in a pot of meat, even if Shmuel said something and it's allowed, we don't do it. So we don't mix. According to one opinion of Rema, we don't mix this. It has it been made in a pot of meat, it's maybe bechizkat besari, as you said, Tom, but it has we see it more as meaty, and we don't mix it with milk. That's three opinions here. Okay, if it has been become complicated until now, I'll make everything much more complicated. Okay. We spoke about the 24 hours. Is what we say now in the 24 hours or after 24 hours? Okay. What we said now is that when we put the fish, let's go back to what we learned, in a bowl of meat in the same day that the meat was there, or are we speaking after 24 hours that is allowed? What do you think? Yes, anyone who wants to guess or think.
So within.
Within, exactly. Why within? You're right. Why within?
Because the problem still exists within 24 hours.
Exactly. If it's more than 24 hours, we don't have a problem. Like we have a problem. Then we have, in addition, the idea of bad taste. The whole idea that Rav said it's not allowed, Shmuel said it's allowed, is because it gives a taste of meat to the fish. And then the fish is mixed with milk later. So the whole discussion we had now is only in a pot or in tools that have been used the same day or inside 24 hours. There are two opinions, so I say both. Meaning that we said that in the most strict opinion, we're not allowed to mix this rice that was cooked in a pot of meat with milk. That is only with that pot was used inside 24 hours for meat. If it hasn't been used, and normally tools are not used twice inside 24 hours, that's not my own words, that's the words of the Talmud, then it's allowed, okay? So everything we spoke about now was when it's used in the same day. Meaning, and I just go to the bottom line after going all the ways. Even if it's used the same day, according to most opinions, we're allowed to mix the part of the food that was made in a milk or meat pot together with the opposite, even if it was made the same day. Some say you shouldn't do it, shouldn't cook it, or even after you cooked it, shouldn't mix it. But that was if it's in the same day. And we should maybe be more careful if it was used the same day, not to do it at all, not to eat it at all. But when it comes to going to my kitchen, and I need a pot that is big enough for rice, should I use the meat or the milk? By principle, it's the same. By principle, I'm allowed to use the meat pot to cook anything that is parve and later eat it hot together with milk. As long as it's parve, of course, as long as there's no milky, then we have to be very careful there. I'm allowed to mix it because of this principle that we spoke about now. Even if I said that, for our own order, it's best to separate, to use meat for meat, milk for milk. Especially, I would say, in here I'm the community house now, it's very important not to do these mixtures between kitchen, meat and milk kitchen, because you never know where it ends. So not for the halacha case, but for the case of the order, it's very, very recommended not to mix. But it's important to say that if I don't have, and there is no other, if I have two pots, one milk and one meat, and I want to have a milk meat, I'll also always use the milk one. But if I'm in a situation, I have guests, the pot is not there, or I have to use it for something else, I'm allowed, with no doubt, to use meat for parve and then eat it. So it's important to know the principle that it's allowed. And that and we come many times to a situation where that is needed. I'm asked here often, what do we do if we have to bake a lot in the oven of meat? We're allowed to use it after 24 hours. Also for milk, and then go back to meat after 24 hours again, and it's allowed. It's allowed. Of course, it's as more it mixes our minds and understanding, less good is it. But what we learned here is, I'll repeat what we learned after I hear Rebecca. Yes.
You kind of just answered what I was going to ask. So, because I know that there's a rationale where some people are like using the same oven for milk and meat, like the actual stove inside, but they wait 24 hours, therefore they say it's okay. But then you have some people who are really strict and they will have like two sets of ovens, or like one for milk and one for meat. So is this kind of built on the same rationale, or?
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
So if we have one oven at home, it's important not to use the same oven, not to use the same oven in the same day. At best is to separate 24 hours between. Because of that, those who can have two ovens, easier is it. You use that and you use that. in my home, we moved from a smaller home to a bigger home, and it was great to get 2 ovens. It made life so much easier for us. But as I said, in principle, as long as we don't use it inside 24 hours, and I will add best also to have separate, not best, it's important to have separate, because it's not exactly the same issue. It's important to say, because what we spoke is to use the meat oven for fish or for rice or for something that is powder. The case you speak about is using the oven for meat and then later for milk. Now it's not twice. But we don't see the oven as a pot. Okay, it's not exactly the same. It has more air in it and so on. Because of that, it's important to separate 24 hours, but also to have different what's called tools you use inside the oven. So only using the oven itself for meat and milk with 24 hours separation between them. That's important.
Do you mean like you have to have different, there are racks inside the oven? Do you have to have different racks, or is it okay to just have like an aluminum foil?
If you put aluminum foil on it or you put something on it, it's different. The most important thing is what we put the food in. So we don't use the same tool for food of meat and milk. And that's also important to reminder, when we spoke after 24 hours, we're only speaking about using meat for parve or milk for parve, and then using it over to something else.
Mm-hmm.
We are not allowed in any case to take a pot of meat, even after 24 hours, if after 2 weeks, and use it for milk. Then we're going back to mixing meat and milk together. And even if 24 hours have gone and we say it gives bad taste and so on, it's not allowed to do it by purpose. And there we have to be very strict. And that is the reason why we said it's best always to use only the milk things for a milk meal and meat things for a meal, because we could be used to just go both ways, and then we will maybe come to a situation where we use a meat pot for milk, and even more strict, a meat pot or milk pot for meat in the same day. And then we really break all the rules, and we break the rule of the Torah of not cooking meat and milk together. So because of that, it's very, very good just to separate. It was important here today to go through the principle, so we understand the idea that milk and meat shouldn't be connected, but the parve thing is actually more flexible than we sometimes understand. Okay, the parve thing is easier. Okay, your question, it's just important to say, I said it's the same. It's not the same, as I said, Rebecca. It's not the same principle because it's meat and milk in the same oven, but it is allowed outside 24 hours because it's oven and not a pot. Yes, any more questions, comments? Are you more confused? I went like all the ways. More confused, or are we more clear?
In a way, I think it's confusing, but it makes me feel comfortable to say that I think it's good to just keep a strict line. So if you know you're having something with milk, then you cook it in the milk pots, and then if you know you're having something with meat, then you put it in the meat pot. So that's that's how I do it.
It gives maybe in a world that there's many details and so on, it's very comfortable to do it like that. But it's also important to remember, and because of that, the things we spoke about today are very important, that when we do a mistake or not exactly, we go out of our comfort zone, it doesn't mean everything is non-kosher. Okay? Some things are really non-kosher, some things are actually okay. And because of that, if we use that by mistake, a wrong pot after 24 hours, we eat the food. We eat the food. If we took by mistake the meat pot and we use it with milk, after 24 hours, we eat the food. We don't do it. And with meat and milk, we have to be more careful. If by mistake we use a non-kosher thing, after a while, we will eat the food. And of course, if we use something parve in meat or milk, we actually allowed to eat it with anything. If we haven't used the same pot inside 24 hours, and then even then, most cases say we allowed. So it's important to know what happens outside our comfort zone, but it's still important to know how strict this is with giving taste. I started speaking a little about the idea that tools today are not exactly the same as they were in old days. And it's important to say that the strict rule is still the same. And even so, it gives so much meaning. And I learned it from, I work a lot with companies and kosher certificate and so on. And I see the whole processing in companies about washing their tools. And there's so big difference between plastic and aluminum or iron and glass. With glass, as most of us do today, doesn't take anything into it. And the whole idea of using, and we didn't speak about how you kosher, but using hot water and something that gives bad taste inside the aluminum tools in productions, they use more or less the same principle. Sometimes it's not exactly according to the kosher rules, and because of that, it's important to follow. But very normally in modern production, they use the same principle as our sages thought about for over 2,000 years ago. And it's actually incredible to see how much they understood the idea of different things. And even if our pots at home don't take taste in the same time or don't feel the taste, it's really the frame of keeping kosher. And maybe the difference between saying, I am not trying not to eat pork and not to mix meat and milk, very important, very good, and following kosher rules as they are, where even the fish that was made in the non-kosher kitchen would not be kosher if it hasn't been done in a special way that we know separated, as we spoke about with the waffles or the eggs that I spoke about. It's really the idea of having kosher in its frame and not only in content here or there. That's like the main idea, and the tools make the kosher kitchens, make the separation between meat and milk also in the kitchens a very strong feeling of keeping kosher and very strong feeling of following the rules as they are. There is one question that will be maybe the last one. Yes.
Hello, I have a question about food blessings. If you accidentally put milk in a meat dish and it becomes and it's over like 60% or something, or it's like 60%. So it's 60%. No,
60, 1 to 60.
1 to 60.
1 to 60.
And it's by accident. Do you still say the same food blessing over the food, or do you do something different if
it's by mistake?
If it's by mistake.
Yeah, could you ask it again, because the sound wasn't perfect? Should I ask the same question again?
Do you still say the same food blessing over fish if fish accidentally?
I can't hear. You could write it in the chat. I haven't seen chat, but I can't understand the word. Sorry. If anyone understood better than me, so help me here, but there was something with the voice that wasn't clear.
I think she said something about, the blessing of food. Are you still going to do it? Like if it's less than 160, you made a mistake with like mixing of the milk and meat.
As long as we eat the food, if the food is kosher, the mixture is kosher because it's less than 1 to 60 or give bad taste or anything else that we said is kosher, then the food is kosher and we bless the food. It's a food we are blessed to eat. I will add, our sages in several places say that those who choose not to eat it, say, oh, there was 1 to 200, well, I won't eat it. They say they break, it's against the belief in the frame. So even being too strict is wrong, because I can always be more strict. But the idea is 1 to 60 is okay. And then the food is okay, I'm allowed to eat it, and of course I need to bless it, if I understood the question correctly. It's not that, okay, I will eat it, but I will bless it because maybe God will be angry at me. No, according to our tradition, this is food that is allowed. It wasn't made by mistake, but it was made by mistake, and the food is kosher, and we should bless it also. Thank you all for participating. I hope it wasn't too complicated the way we went. We went through the principle of taste, going into the tools in kosher and non-kosher, and then in meat and milk, and then in parve into meat and milk. That was the thing we discussed today. Thank you all, and Shavua Tov to everyone.
Thank you.
Shavua tov.
Thank you. Shavua tov.
Shavua tov.
Tusen tack.
Shavua tov.
Shavua tov.